A question that circles around all the time is, well, why didn't you just leave? Instead of going on my own soapbox rant today, I'm actually going to be referencing an article. This article is entitled, Why Do Victims Stay? And it's on ncadv.org. This article starts out with something really strong and really, really important. Abusers repeatedly go to extremes to prevent the victim from leaving. One study found in interviews with men who have killed their wives that either threats of separation by their partner or actual separations were most often the precipitating events that led to the murder. If you hear nothing else, please understand that that is one of the most terrifying things ever. It shows that victims are put at an extreme risk for even considering leaving. The victim in violent relationships knows their abuser best and fully knows the extent to which they will go to make sure they have and can maintain control over the victim. I want to pause right here for a second. The victim knows the violence of the abuser the best. One of my biggest pet peeves that I consistently hear is that if there is a threat of abuse, then it will be overtly obvious. And it is dangerous to believe a victim because they are probably lying. What that does is that looks at the victim and looks what they've gone through and says, nah, you don't know them like I know them. Oh, they would never do that. These things that don't seem like they're that big of a deal strip the dignity and the hope of the victim piece by piece, and they already don't have a lot left. So saying things like this can be the most dangerous thing because one, it could lead them to stay with the abuser, or two, it could lead them to taking their own life. When it comes to abuse, the nuances and understanding the realities of it is so incredibly important. And the other thing to realize is that we have this stereotypical view of what an abuser should be. When you think of an abusive partner, the first thing that comes to our mind is a fat, bald white dude who has beer stains on his tank top, amber bottles in his hand, sloshing around, throwing things and threatening to hurt people. Yes, that stereotype exists for a reason, but the truth is that abusers can be very charming and they can seem very kind and they're very charismatic. How do you think they hook the victims in to begin with? Abusers do not want the world to know that they're abusers. So why would they do something in front of you that's going to get them in trouble? A recent study of intimate partner homicides found that 20% of homicide victims were not the domestic violence victims themselves, but family members, friends, neighbors, persons who intervened, law enforcement responders, or bystanders. 20%. That's 2 out of 10 people who die in domestic violence altercations are not even the victim. This list is not exhaustive, but let's start reading through it anyway. Additional barriers to escaping a violent relationship include, but are not limited to, the fear that the abuser's actions will become more violent and may become lethal, unsupportive friends and family, knowledge of the difficulties of single parenting, and reduced financial circumstances. The victim feeling that the relationship is a mix of good times, love, and hope, along with the manipulation, intimidation, and fear. It all boils down to cognitive dissonance, which leads to a trauma bond. I've done quite a few videos on this, which I will link to in the show description. The victim's lack of knowledge of or access to safety and support. And please do not just say, well, go to a DV shelter. Absolutely, yes, those are resources, but one, those resources are not available everywhere. And unfortunately, they are at full capacity more often than we realize. I am not discouraging anyone from going. Absolutely, if that's a resource, please go seek help. If you don't understand the realities of going to a DV shelter, don't act like it's the easiest decision to make. Fear of losing custody of any children if they leave or divorce their abuser, or fear the abuser will hurt or even kill their children. Lack of means to support themselves and or their children financially, or lack of access to cash, bank accounts, or assets. Lack of having somewhere to go. For example, no friends or family to help, no money for a hotel, shelter programs are full or limited by length of stay. A fear that homelessness may be their only option if they leave. Religious or cultural beliefs and practices may not support divorce or may dictate outdated gender roles and keep the victim trapped in the relationship. Lastly, belief that two-parent households are better for children despite abuse. I did this for a long time. I believed that it was better to stay so I could tell my son that I tried, then realizing that it was more harmful to stay because he was seeing the interactions and he was seeing that as normal, and he was taking that and putting that in his brain as this is what a family is. I don't want him to see that as what a family is. I want him to know that families are loving. They are not abusive. They are not verbally abusive. They are not physically abusive. I had to let go of this guilt that I felt because the relationship ended. Now I get the opportunity to show my son what it means to demand respect, to know that I deserve more out of life, to build us a life from the ground up without relying on someone who's going to treat us like garbage. The societal barriers to escaping a violent relationship. This is a societal massive problem. Statistics say that 1 in 4 women and 1 in 5 men, and I believe it is closer to 1 in 2 and 1 in 3 respectively, are victims of abuse. So anywhere where there is a group of people, there is a victim of abuse. But the terrifying part is they may not even realize that they're a victim. And so that's why it's incredibly important for us to share and to get this information out there, and why I'm so passionate about sharing it, because this affects every single person. Even if you don't know it, you know someone who is a survivor of abuse. You know someone who has been assaulted. You know someone who understands this stuff on a level that you thank God every day that you don't. Let me put up my soapbox and let's dive back into the article. Societal barriers to escaping an abusive relationship. A victim's fear of being charged with desertion, losing custody of children or joint assets, anxiety about a decline in living standards for themselves and their children, reinforcement of clergy or secular counselors of saving a couple's relationship at all costs rather than the goal of stopping the violence. This is so common. And you see this in comments of TikTok videos. You see this in conversations where people put this value of family over safety, or the value of connection over safety. This is why when people come forward and they share about their abusive parents, some will say, oh, but that's your mom, you can't hate them. Oh, well, that's your dad, that's your grandma, you can't hate them. You can't cut them out. The hell I can't. We do this within a relationship setting as well, where people will say, I think I need to leave, and they'll go, oh, but your kid, they need to have a dad in their lives. They need to have the mom in their lives. You can't cut the grandma out of their life, because we value that over the respect and safety of the victim. Lack of support to victims by police officers and law enforcement who may treat violence as a domestic dispute instead of a crime where one person is physically attacking another person. Often, victims of abuse are arrested and charged by law enforcement, even if they are only defending themselves against the batterer. Reactive abuse is very real. Anyone who is going to be in a leadership position, anyone who's going to be in law enforcement, whether they are a police officer, whether they're a sheriff, whether they're a judge, whether they're, a CPS worker, wherever, they need to understand what the fudge reactive abuse is. We saw this particularly in the Gabby Petito case, where people would say, oh, well, she hit her boyfriend, so she deserved it. But when you look at the footage, she is bawling her eyes out, so apologetic, while he is standing there. It's no big deal. It's fine. It's just, she is the way she is. No, a victim of abuse who has actually been abused is not going to go, oh, we're fine. Turn on the charm. Things are great. While the abuser is over there crying. That's not how that works. What abusers will do is they will poke and they will prod it to get a reaction for them to say that they are in fact the victim. I'm not going to have a soapbox moment here. I'm going to make sure I link to that video in the show description. Dissuasion by police of the victim filing charges. Some dismiss or downplay the abuse, side with the abuser, or do not take the victim's account of the abuse seriously, because we don't know if they're telling the truth. We can't believe them. We don't know. What if they're making it all up? I heard of this one person 20 years ago that lied and got someone locked up. I'm not trying to downplay the reality of that, because yes, it does happen, but why are we downplaying the reality of the majority to cater to the few manipulative people. One more that I want to address. The socialization of some made to believe that they are responsible for making their relationship work. Failure to maintain the relationship equals failure as a person. Oh my God, I relate to this one so much. I pined after my ex for so long because I felt like it was my fault and I felt like it was my responsibility to save the relationship. And I felt like a complete failure because I was so worried of becoming a statistic that I was willing to put up with the abuse. I didn't want to fall under the umbrella of failed marriage. Like, that's what I saw it as. I didn't see it as leaving an abusive relationship. I saw it as a failed marriage. And there are so many people that feel the same way. And so I just want to say, if you relate to that, you are not a failure. The relationship didn't fail. You were abused by someone who saw you as property. That's not a failed marriage. You chose to take your freedom back. And that is incredibly powerful. And I am so proud of you. I'm going to go ahead and link to a playlist right here to where if you do relate to anything that I've shared today, it's going to help you as you begin your journey to healing. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. And never forget that you are strong, you are capable, you are intelligent, and boo, you are so freaking worthy.